the impending Mangala switch to Leon. Are we safe from PSR BS next season?
I suspect Forest fans and the Forest owner, because we know how ambitious he is, fans will be absolutely delighted because that actually creates a level playing field.
Guys, welcome back to another episode where we're going to discuss Forest PSR situation in light of the Niakhate deal, Mangala, and plenty of other things. And who else could we speak to but the guru himself, Kieran? Yes, I'm talking about you, mate. How you doing, buddy?
I'm keeping busy. There's no off season as far as football finance is concerned, because it's just one story rolls into another, and all of a sudden, 30th of June has become the sort of the soft transfer window, which has implications for clubs and implications for me.
Yeah, I'll bet. So I really do appreciate you, as always, taking the time. Guys, make sure, as always, you're listening to The Price of Football. They had an episode released yesterday talking about the loopholes, which I'll ask you about in a bit, matey. So make sure you go check it out. I'll leave the links there and Kieran's Twitter as well for you to follow. Kieran, can I start with my first question? And I'm just going to jump straight into it. And this is the question that's on all Forest fans' lips. After the Niakhate deal yesterday and the impending Mangala switch to Leon, are we safe from PSR BS next season? Just before Kieran answers that so important question, let's remind you that this video is sponsored by our good friends at CCL, where you can make massive savings right now as they have a sale going on. So for example, if you wanted to upgrade your graphics card to this beauty, the GeForce RTX 4060, it's down 61 quid right now to 376.99. And if you use code FFTV25, you'll also get £25 off any orders from £300. Let's get back to Kieran and find out if Forest are safe.
Forest are safer. Now, yeah, the actual intricacies of deals. Remember, there's a huge amount of unknowns when it comes to football. We don't know what the wages were this season. We don't know whether there were relegation avoidance bonuses, for players, managers. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and we're also relying on transfer fees both in and out, which are being quoted in the press but aren't necessarily being quoted by the clubs themselves. Forest was certainly under pressure to sell players. If you read the commission reports when it came to the points deductions, I think it made it fairly clear that Forest were heading for a potential breach in 23-24 unless they took appropriate action. Now, I think it could be argued that these player sales will be appropriate action. And also, I think from a common sense point of view, it's pointless doing half a job. It's pointless selling a couple of players and still being over the limit. So I think that the fact the club is being proactive should make things more comfortable. The Premier League will take a look at the numbers in great depth. They might push back, and I think that's a separate issue. But we'll have to wait and see. But I think they're certainly in a far better position than they were at the start of the window.
Yeah, because on that commission report, they were saying that they were already predicting at least 15 million over. We've seen some reports, I think, from the likes of John Percy, I think it was, saying Forest need to make 20 odd million in PSR profit. So it's definitely better than it was. I've slept a little better last night off the back of that sale. And just on the other side of that sale, because obviously Niakhate's gone and Mangala has this option to buy, but it looks like the clubs are discussing the fees, etc. with that. Now, our understanding is that most of these loan signings where they turn into options to buy would fall under the 1st of July onwards. Would that potentially cause Forest a problem if, say, the deal went through on the 1st of July and we missed by one day? Would we have like mitigating circumstances in that scenario if that Mangala deal was the one that saved us, quote unquote?
Yeah, I don't think there would be an issue under those circumstances. And the reason for that is that if you take a look at the accounting rules, there's something called a post-balance sheet event. I don't want to go too nerdy on this, but what it's saying is that if something happens shortly after the balance sheet date, which in our circumstances is the 30th of June, but had been significantly negotiated prior to that, all that's happening is that you are dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and therefore that particular transaction can be backdated to the 30th of June. It's got to be within a reasonable time frame. And with regards to, because I'm sure Forest fans will say, well, hold on, didn't this form the basis of the player A, who we've got no idea who he was?
Not a clue. We're still figuring out.
35 million. We've got no idea who that gentleman may have been. But I think that was completely different because A, it was the end of August, and B, he'd actually played for Forest on a couple of occasions. And reading the commission report, it looks as if the club owner only effectively sanctioned the sale of the player on about the 27th of August. And he put all of those features together. So if there is a sale after the 30th of June, I think you've really got to get your ducks in a row. And I suspect Forest will have learnt their lesson here. They will be able to evidence email offers for individual players before the 30th of June. They'll be able to evidence that they had accepted or quasi-accepted an offer by saying, well, we want a little bit more money, we want to change the terms in terms of, if I sell a player for £20 million, is that going to be £20 million up front, or is it going to be 2 instalments or 3 instalments? So it could be that there was some to and fro between the two sets of chief executives. And again, all you're doing is you're just agreeing terms. So if that is the case, then a sale shortly after the year end will be acceptable, in my opinion. The Premier League might decide to take a very harsh view of this, and I think if they did that, it would be completely inappropriate of the Premier League. And the Premier League's come in for a lot of stick. I honestly think they are trying to do the right thing for the vast majority of clubs as far as the executive are concerned. There, I can understand individual club fans feeling aggrieved, and I can also understand fans taking the view that the rules are not fit for purpose. And that's a separate podcast discussion. And if you've got 3 hours set aside, we can probably go through that.
I think it's 3 hours from your side is the hard bit, man.
So that's the position in which we find ourselves. So I don't think if the sale hasn't gone through, people ought to be having sleepless nights, provided there's evidence of progression between the two parties.
Interesting. And just sticking on the player A, I know the answer to this, but I think coming from you, it'd be a bit more authoritative. Now, Forest were trying to push that into the previous year's books. Obviously, that was their mitigation. With that being rejected, can you just confirm to the fans that the Jono money, the 48 million or whatever it was, goes onto this current year's books, just as a kind of clarification point?
Yes, it's now definitely, because the transaction took place between the 1st of July 2023 and the 30th of June 2024. So yes, all of that will be booked as profit. I think the concern is, the Premier League would have been aware of that. And going back to the commission report, even after taking into consideration that particular sale, it still looks as if Forest were somewhere in the region of 15 to 20 million. I've got my sources in the Midlands. You've got yours. You're much closer to Nottingham, of course, than I am. But I've heard similar in terms of that's the activity that they have to do before the guillotine comes down.
Yep. And one of the deals that Forest have done, I know it shocks a few fans that we're still buying players before the 30th of June. We got Marko Stamenic, and we've loaned him straight out to Olympiacos on a fee of, it's been reported, about 4.5 million. Is that good business in your mind? Because I assume Forest would take a loan fee on that, which would potentially offset the amortization. Would that be how it works at all?
Yes, I mean, buying a player at this point in the window is actually very, very cheap, because if you're, let's say that you sign a player for £4 million on a 4-year contract, that works out as £1 million a year. So there's 52 weeks in a year. That works out as 20 grand a week. So it's only going to cost Forest 20 to 30 grand in amortization before the 30th of June. So
So,
buying players, don't fret about that. You just go full steam
okay.
ahead. It's the sale of the players which is absolutely critical from a PSR point of view.
So it's prorated, is it?
Yes.
The the fee of it. So it's not costing us any because we've got Carlos Miguel, the goalkeeper, coming as well for 3.5 mil. That as well would be kind of
Yeah.
prorated, I guess.
Yeah. Amortization is strictly it's done on a daily basis, but you'd normally do it on a monthly or quarterly.
Ah, that's fascinating to hear. That's fascinating to hear. And then in terms of the new rules that are coming in, I know you've done loads of podcasts on it, and guys, make sure you go check it out. But in essence, the thing I'm just struggling with is I've heard that they want to almost run them in parallel next
Mm.
season, and the clubs are working towards that model. Does that mean with Forest obviously going to the 105 now? Um, is there going to be much change that we're going to notice in terms of what they are doing, or will things become a bit more relaxed with the
No, I
105?
think the 105 is likely to be in operation for season 24-25,
Hmm.
with a view to being replaced by this thing called the squad control cap. And what it will mean is that if you are a club that is playing in Europe, you can spend no more than 70% of ticket sales, commercial deals, and broadcast money, plus player sale profits. So you pay no more
Yeah,
than 70% of that on player wages. So admin wages will be excluded, agents' fees, amortization, and player write-down. So there's a lot of moving parts going into the calculations, and anybody who can say with confidence that they know what the outcome for individual clubs is will be talking nonsense. I stick numbers into a spreadsheet, but I always caveat that by saying these are estimates and this is based on historic data, just to get us a feel for where the clubs are. So it's 70% for those clubs that are competing in Europe. And if you're not competing in Europe, and therefore you don't have the benefits of that additional European income stream, it looks as if it's going to be 85%.
and then how does that work against? They call it the anchoring, don't they? Where it's a multiplier of, say, the bottom club. I know Southampton's been used as the example a lot, and then it's a multiplier above that. Does one supersede the other when it comes to those rules?
Yes, but by the looks of things, the 70% squad cost control cap is going to take priority. But if a club passes that, there was going to be a separate test. And what it says is let's take the Premier League's TV deal and say how much of the Premier League's TV deal is going to the bottom club in the Premier League. Now, we've used Southampton because we've got the
Yeah,
figures in terms
yeah.
of distribution for 22-23. Southampton earned £103 million from the Premier League that season. And then you multiply that by a factor. And it looks like the factor is going to be 5. So 103 times 5 is £515 million. And that is the cap. So you could have passed the 70% or the 85%, but then the next test is have you also ensured that wages plus agents' fees plus amortization plus impairment is less than £515 million? If anchoring was the only rule that was introduced, I suspect Forest fans and the Forest owner, because we know how ambitious he is, and Newcastle and Villa, I think those club owners and those club fans will be absolutely delighted because that actually creates a level playing field. That says
Yes,
that Forest,
yes.
in theory, they can spend as much money on wages as Manchester City and Chelsea and Liverpool, and the logic would be that if you've got a rich owner, that creates a more competitive product on the pitch.
So just to clarify, if you just so I've got this right, if you breach the 70% mark, is that classed as a PSR breach or whatever the new acronym is going to be? Or would they then kick it onto the anchoring and say, okay, you've breached the 70%, but you're still within the multiplier, therefore you're still fine?
No. If you breach the 70%, potentially you're up on a charge.
Right,
If you satisfy the 70%, then there's a second review
right,
in
okay.
terms of it's a bit like VAR. Yeah, referee gives a
Yeah,
penalty, looks like he's and then you've got a second set of eyes, because remember, you also have, for those clubs that are playing in Europe, they have to satisfy UEFA's
Yeah.
rules, which are the 70% rule from
Yeah.
season 25-26.
Yeah. Damn it. So we can't just spend what we want going forward. Like you said, it'd be fantastic to see and create a level playing field. I mean, Kieran, I know your time is tight. I want to thank you for clearing up those key questions that have been burning on the minds of the Forest fans. And guys, make sure you're following Kieran on all his socials. Honestly, I've learned so much about accountancy just by his tweets. It's fascinating. And what are your hopes for Brighton this season, mate? Are you happy with the new manager? Finish this off?
I think it's the most Brighton recruitment of all time. Nobody's heard of him. He's 31. He's from a left-wing green football club, and as you may be aware, Brighton's got the only green MP in the country. So yeah, I think it's the most Brighton thing that you can do. We'll wait and see.
Yeah. And Drewsbury Hall on his way as well, apparently.
Yeah. Well, that's the rumor. We'll
Yeah.
never say never in football.
Exactly. Kieran, you've been an absolute legend. Guys, please make sure you've liked and subscribed as always. Hope this has helped you. Get any thoughts and comments in down below, and we'll see you on the next video. You Reds.